Very good morning, everyone. This is your host, Pramod Solanki, and welcome to the fifth.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, Professor T. Rao. To you and to each one watching here, a very warm welcome to the fifth session of Leadership Series. Actually, we have had this conversation on 18th of this month. Apparently, there was some technical glitch and it could not get properly recorded. So I requested Professor T.V. Rao to be available again for a conversation around the key points we had discussed on 18th. And Professor Rao has been kind enough to be here. Thank you so much, TV, for joining us once again. And those of you who may be watching this for the first time, were not there in the live session, even though TV wants the introduction to be rather brief, but I just have to tell you that he is, together with Professor T.V. Rao, is a pioneer for HRD in the country.
Uadi Pareek.
I'm sorry, Professor T.V. Rao and Professor Uadi Pareek, together with Professor Uadi Pareek, they've been the pioneers of establishing HRD as a discipline in the country. And if today all the institutions and most of the corporates have this as a distinct function, I think they owe it to the work that they began, Professor T.V. Rao together with Professor Uadi Pareek, way back in 70s and 80s. So covering 5 decades, in such short time, particularly when TV says, let's get on with the conversation, is difficult. But just to give you a glimpse, 62 books, hundreds and hundreds of articles and newspapers, awards from almost anybody that is associated with HRD function has acknowledged his work. But just a couple of them that I want to mention is in 2019, he has received Asia Pacific HR Professional of the Year Award in Taiwan. Then Association of Indian Management Schools has set up an award in the honor of late Ravi Mathai, the first director of Indian Institute of Management. The Ravi Mathai Fellow Award from Association of Indian Management Schools has been, honored, conferred on Professor T.V. Rao. Indian Academy of Management has honored him with Lifetime Achievement, Award in the field of HRD. A professor at IIM Ahmedabad for a large part of his career has established Academy of HRD and number of things in this space. Since he says keep it very short, I will rest my case here. I'm extremely happy and proud that you have agreed to come on this platform and share your leadership journey with us. So TV, like Professor T.V. Rao, all those who know him, they've got used to calling him TV because that's how he's called at IIM Ahmedabad from his beginning of his career. So please bear with that acronym as I use repeatedly. TV, the first question in the interest of people who grow into leadership role that I place with every guest is the key influences that have shaped the person, that Professor T.V. Rao we know of. So help us share some key aspects that shape you as a person that we know today.
First of all, thank you, Pramod, for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit of lesser known parts of my work. I think it will be nice to focus on little lesser known parts. I think all my books and other things, people know it. Right. When you asked me, actually, this set of questions, it is the first question which you have asked just now, which got me to think a little beyond. Because post my college days, I think I have also written in my book, Effective People, how my life got shaped after my BSc at Loyola College. But I think the first 15 years of my life, not many people would know. So I would certainly like to focus a bit on this. I was born in a very, very ordinary, unusually ordinary or a poor family, where my mother used to earn her daily livelihood by being a daily wage laborer in the fields. Actually, I mean, the story goes, actually, our story is a filmy story, very interesting story, because my mother and one of the richest people in my village fell in love with each other. They ran away, got married, and when I was about to be born, this man was brought back by the villagers because he belonged to a different community and a rich person. So he was married to another person. And thereon, I think he went in his own way, sold all his property, went away for fear my mother may go to court and all that. My mother had no such intentions. She took it as a determination to bring me up. And only her single most important thing I can imagine was all the time she was stressing that I must get educated. So I think that's her determination, which seemed to have influenced me in terms of which I never realized. In fact, I must say that until she died in the year 2003, I didn't realize what great person she was. I have had a lot of issues when people talked of gender issues and women being not so well looked after in this country, etc. It for many years didn't make sense to me, and it was only later I started thinking this is because of the great mother I had, who I never felt the absence of a father, and the way, and she went through a lot of avatars. First thing that she was a daily wage laborer, then she became a mutamestri, where she used to lead a group of laborers. Then later she went on to, she picked up some Ayurvedic medicines and she became an Ayurvedic doctor for a few years, which was not a great earning. And after that, she shifted to be a rice merchant, in the sense that she would go to all nearby villages, collect paddy, send it to the rice mill, and sell the mill to the people there. And later, I think she actually, when she was doing this, I was PGP chairman at IIM Ahmedabad, and that was the year before that I earned a little money to be able to construct a house in Hyderabad. That is because Uday and I were working in Indonesia as USAID consultants. So the little money I had put on constructing a house, and I went and appointed a architect who claimed that he was doing the house for Dr. Krishnamurthy of Steel Authority. And I was also working at that time with Steel Authority and so on. I was very impressed with that fellow. And it was only during 6 months after the contract was signed, and then he was telling me the house, the walls have come up and all that. On my way to Chennai, one of the IIM Alumni Association meetings, I routed through Hyderabad, and when I went and saw there was absolutely nothing. No walls have come up, and the architect, when I met the architect, he threw up his hands and he said that the contractor took the money, 70,000 rupees. This is 85 or 86 or 87. There's a lot of money those days. Those days, our salaries were something like 14,000 rupees per month. That's the kind of a. So it was. So I didn't know what to do. Now here, PGP chairman, I am Ahmedabad. A fellow didn't know how to handle this, and I told my mother, who didn't know how to read and write. My mother was illiterate that way, and my grandfather, who brought me up along with her, also was illiterate. So she came and she traced out the contractor's brother, and then managed to construct out all single-handedly, living in some of the places now what is called as Madhavpur. She was living there and finished the whole thing. And now all this I am mentioning because although she didn't know how to read and write, I think she had something in her, which I think, which probably were the genes, which I only realized much later. And then when she died as the General Secretary of Andhra Pradesh Mahila Congress. And she used to be very popular in the political circles, but she never aspired for any of. She would all that she does was, she knew the merchants, the farmers, everyone. She would take the politicians and work with them and things like that. And my grandfather, who also had a big influence on me, was through merely his hard work. So I think their hard work, their sincerity, their ability to keep on discovering their talent, I assume this I never thought for a long time. These are the ones up to my 15th year, first 15 years of life. And I think the village atmosphere where you play with other children, and then you play badminton, a lot of sports. I used to play a lot of sports in the school, and so on and so forth. All these things mattered quite a bit, which you don't realize until you start reflecting on them and so on. So this is the early part of my life, which probably had nothing great, Pramod. I don't think this is anything great, but for others who have not experienced this may be great. When Ravi and I used to work in rural Javaja, Ravi was fascinated with the rural atmosphere. Every small thing is a big thing for him. Whereas I used to feel, Ravi, this is where I lived. I think this is not any kind of a novel experience and so on. So that is the little bit of my earlier life, Pramod. I don't know if it makes sense at all for you.
It makes perfect sense for so many reasons. I'm sure it will for audience who are listening. I think that resilience to struggle, resilience to go after whatever you have chosen. I think you have had a combination of it's an inspiring story of your mother and your own. And I'm sure the genetics and upbringing both have played a role in accomplishing what you have accomplished, all along. So thanks for sharing and opening your heart out. It's an inspiring story, I'm sure, for everyone. So now I come to, the time when yourself and Professor Uadi Pareek, way back in 70s, began working with Larsen and Toubro, and eventually we have a birth of a discipline called human resource development. Please share with us your reflection of how did the whole thing come about.
Yeah, I think to come to that point, I have to tell you a little more important story, about which I have written in my first chapter in Effective People. Okay. I was a student of Loyola College. In my village, I was educated in Telugu medium. I think it is in Loyola College where I started learning English. It is because people spoke English and so on. The principal of the college, one Father Douglas Gordon, took a lot of interest in me. And I wanted to do my MSc chemistry after my BSc. I got an ordinary second class, but second class in those days was great.
Yes.
So Father Gordon told me that, look, you are too young. This is 1965 when I graduated. I must have been about 18 years when I graduated. And don't go by my registered age, which is a little slightly different, because those days they used to show the age as far higher in order to let you sit in the SSLC exam. Even then, I had to get a medical certificate. I was underage and so on. So Father Gordon told me that you're too young to do your MSc chemistry. So I'll give you a 2-year demonstrator post. So work as a demonstrator in chemistry and then go for it. So I more or less agreed to be there as a demonstrator. Then one fine morning, I get a letter from him saying that there is a new college called Regional College of Education started by NCERT. And they give you the same money. I will pay you as a demonstrator. So you go there as a stipend. So you go there and see if you can get admitted. So this was a Regional College of Education started with Ohio State University collaboration by NCERT in Mysore. I went there, appeared for the interviews, and then I was probably again the youngest. Most of the fellows came there with a lot of experience as teachers, somebody MSc in zoology, MA, and all kinds of things. But I think maybe they wanted to have some diversity. I don't know for what reason. I used to be quite good at extracurricular activity, dramatics. So I staged a little bit of evening. I showed my little bit of my talent. And I think maybe that impressed them. They took me, and I topped that particular year, my B.Ed Science. And there are 3 professors who are responsible for getting me interested. One is Praful and Dave, about whom in my last conversation also I mentioned. Praful Dave did his PhD from St. Louis, just returned from USA at that time. He used to bring rats to the class and teach us how rats learn, entire learning theories and all that. So that aroused my interest in psychology, and I was consistently topping. Then one Dr. C.L. Anand, who later became Vice Chancellor of Northeastern Hill University, and I think he died. All of them, I think one P.R. Nair, all of them are no more. But we remain, not only they were my teachers. Why I'm mentioning this was for coming to reaching Uday Pareek, there were a whole series of accidents that have happened. God sent, I would assume. And Dave, Anand, and Nair were one of those. And my regional college is one. At the end of it, Dave asked me, when I topped the institute in science stream, what are you going to do? I said, MSc chemistry. One more year demonstratorship, then I go for. He said, you'll be wasting your life. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, no, you should do your psychology. You have a special aptitude for psychology. This is what a teacher makes a difference. I said, who is going to admit me for master in psychology? He wrote a letter to Dr. Parameshwaran, who was a professor of psychology at very young chap. In fact, when I went to give the letter, I found a student walking in the corridors, asked that student that, look, where can I find the head of the Department of Psychology's room? So he said, you want to meet him? I'll take you. He took me to the room of the head of the department, and he sat in the chair and he said, now what do you want? Such was a young fellow. But Parameshwaran out of way admitted me. He recognized B.Ed. Nowadays, professors go by rule book. He, I think, threw away the rule, and he said B.Ed of regional college is equivalent to M.Ed of Osmania. Osmania had a rule that M.Ed people can be admitted. My other classmates were masters, either B.A. psychology or M.Ed. And I topped the university and created a new record. That was the time Parameshwaran introduced me to Somnath Chattopadhyay. I'm sure you heard of Somnath.
I've met him.
You met him, okay. He was working as director of behavioral science at CET Institute. So we had a project correlating organizational climate of small industries with productivity. And that is when Somnath introduced me to Uday. Uday was not here. Uday was in University of North Carolina. In fact, I wrote a letter to, because my seniors went and worked with him. In fact, one of my seniors who went from Osmania went to North Carolina, and first letter he wrote to us is how Uday Pareek was nice, and he bought, Kodandapani bought car from him for $500. He is now driving a car. So, you know, those days as a student, your aspirations go up. I want to go to US, work with Uday Pareek. I never met him. He was in Hyderabad, but he was in North Carolina at that time. So when I went there, when I wrote a letter to him, he said, I'm returning back to India. So you can't work with me, but I'll write a letter to a few people. And he wrote to Rensis Lickert a letter. And Lickert, I mean, those days, letters used to take almost about 6 weeks to 2 months. Rensis Lickert asked me to apply. And I didn't know. I think I used to get... those days there was no net, no mechanism. You just have to go to library, consult books. I applied to the Michigan State University, whereas Lickert was in University of Michigan. So once Lickert wrote to me saying that I don't find your application. I think that is when I gave that particular thing up, then went to Andhra University. Then Uday Pareek returned back, and that is when I joined Uday. But I must tell you, the reason why I've given you this long story, the first project on which Uday and I worked was on motivation training for mental health, sponsored by the Indian Council of Medical Research. So I was a research assistant research officer with Uday for almost about 7 to 8 months, and working on how classroom teacher behavior impacts the student mental health. Those days we conceptualized mental health, positive mental health. What we are talking now, post-pandemic mental health, so many seminars are going on. But I think even in those days, we called mental health as students who are adjusted to the school, who can take initiative, and so on. And we proved in our research, classroom teacher behavior impacts student mental health. And by giving feedback to them, I think the teachers automatically change. So this was a wonderful experiment we conducted, and because of this experiment and so on, I became assistant professor of education and training. Within 1 year of my joining NIHI, National Institute of Health Administration, I think the ministry went out of way because they needed 3 years minimum experience. But I had this unique combination of BSc Mathematics, B.Ed, and then I did a certificate with NCERT on programmed instruction. And I was already working on ICMR project. So they appointed me a little out of way. That was a great accomplishment, I must say, at a very young age, to be an assistant professor in a health institute. So my first connection with IIM was my boss there at that time, professor of education and training, one Haricharan Singh Gandhi. He said, they all used to call me Venkatesh. Venkatesh, we must train all these doctors on training techniques. He wrote to IIM Ahmedabad. I think he wrote to Ravi Mathai. I didn't know who the director was and so on, for which we never received any reply on training trainers and so on. That's a little bit of a story apart. Then Uday went to Udaipur University as director, School of Basic Sciences. I gave up my assistant professor, went and joined him as lecturer to start a department of applied psychology. So I think for 4 or 5 years we were together. And I had very closely observed Uday. He was my PhD guide. And for my PhD, I worked on impact of medical college environment on medical students and things of that kind. So that is when Uday was Uday, I think, got fed up being an administrator in Udaipur University at some point of time. So I still remember the day he called up Ravi Mathai one fine evening when he had a lot of issues to sort out with the Vice Chancellor, with the students and so on. He said, look, this is not how I want to spend my life. So he called Ravi and I was a witness to conversation saying that, Ravi, you offered me a job long ago. I refused it, but is that open now? I remember Ravi telling that I'm no more director, but I'll talk to the director, Samuel Paul. And I think within the next month, both Uday and I went to visit IIM. He was offered, he joined about 9 months before me. I continued at Udaipur University and we used to write. We have written 2 books at that time. One is on Handbook of Instruments. And the second one, we were doing the behavioral science research in health and population and so on. So for which I stayed for a couple of months at Uday's place in IIM. Now, this all has something to do with the HRD, the question you have asked. You might be wondering, why is this fellow giving me such a long story? The long story because continuity, what I find in life today, has come from I would say from my childhood, from my BSc, from my B.Ed. I find all these are interconnected. Every project I have done is interconnected to what we came up with human resource development as a department, as a philosophy, as a way of looking at in L&T. But to come straight to your question, L&T asked Uadi Pareek, I joined IIM, then they asked Uadi Pareek to review the performance appraisal system. Denison Pereira was the head of personnel at the time. And Uday asked me to join him. And you know, IIM culture in those days, I'm not sure how much it exists. A senior professors always valued having juniors with them, and they worked together. Uday and Uday was born in 1925, I in 46 or 47. So it's almost about 20 years of difference. But he took me, and then we both interviewed people. Our approach was, if we have to find out any improvements in appraisal, we have to talk to people what kind of appraisal system that they want. So we divided ourselves, and that is when I remember, I mentioned to you, I think last time, I met A.M. Nayak, the only person I remember having met, because he was one of those junior, younger managers in those days, with smoking a cigarette, very heavy looking person, took me to the Powai canteen, and he said, Professor, show me where is performance in the performance appraisal. And then when I asked him what kind of an appraisal you want, he rattled out that it should be planned, it should be reviewed. Of course, he's not the only one who contributed. Many L&T managers contributed. So at the end of all of it, about 3-4 months of interviews, we were putting all of these together. Uday and I was sitting in Taj Hotel near Gateway of India. And we were sitting in the old Taj. And then at the end of it, Uday said that, look, all these people are suggesting far more than performance appraisal. We came up with potential appraisal, career planning is important, feedback and coaching, training and development. We came up with 6 systems. At the end of it, Venkatesh, he said, all this can't be done by the personnel department. We have to create a new department. Let's call it as Human Resource Development Department. I mean, I still remember Uday is saying this, let us call this Human Resource Development Department. So if you ask me, it is conceptualization of Uday and the, I think, suggestions of L&T managers. And I think my background, tracing back to a B.Ed, psychology, mathematics, all these kind of things, which in my view gave birth to this integrated HRD systems. And we presented it to L&T board. Hawk Larson was still present there, but N.M. Desai was the president. Totally accepted in toto. Our report was accepted. We were asked to help them implement it and so on. And the rest of it, I think has been written at different places. So it's a long story. Excuse me for narrating this. I am not sure if people...
I think people who have been hearing about HRD in bits and pieces, this will tie up all those pieces, and it's very what shall I say? It shows very original thinking on whatever inputs you gather, trying it a very distinct expression that captures a certain kind of work which was certainly not covered by personal function of those times. So
we have not. In fact, the term human resource development, I looked at so many places, I couldn't find anything. That's when I wrote this article. Is it a old wine in new bottle? What is it, and so on. So I must acknowledge it came from our own thinking, and the main contributors are L&T managers. That's why you'll find sometimes I've even dedicated some of my books to L&T managers. And both of us were privileged to be L&T professors, though at different places and so on. So we look at it with a lot of pride, and so that is what is the story of.
Absolutely a pioneering work. I mean, I also knew in bits and pieces, but now the whole story ties up. And from there onwards, it has grown and grown. Is that right? In terms of books, in terms of projects, in terms of instruments, it has been growing, and actually that's where the next question I want to ask. The way you people went, having spotted it that there is a need distinctly to focus in this area, the way yourself and late Professor Uadi Pareek went after it, and all the way up to establishing a national HRD network, that is where in the national plane, if I may say, an acceptance that this is a discipline that the two professors have articulated, and every institution and organization stands to benefit. So tell us a little bit more about that journey forward now.
Yeah, actually, once we did this in L&T and the report was accepted, then Uday said it has to be looked at from the larger context, and therefore the entire function has to be renamed. We got another consulting project to relook at the entire reorganization of personnel department. That's when we had the second one called as human resource function, in which the industrial relations were renamed as worker affairs with a lot of respect. It consisted of HRD, HR administration, and worker affairs, three things. Even today, I say peace, stability, and growth. Worker affairs, industrial relations is peace. Stability is HR administration or personal management. Growth is HRD, development, and so on. That is the way we conceptualize. Now, Uday is very conceptual, was and has always been. In fact, he used to tell me all the time to, Venkatesh, read up a lot of models we should think of. So he wrote the first 3 chapters of our book, Designing HR Systems. And then he was talking about his philosophy with State Bank of India. State Bank, in one of the board meetings, I think, listened to him and unanimously decided to start a new department called HRD. They didn't have a consulting. They just heard Uday's lecture of how integrated HRD systems is being promoted in L&T, and then took a decision. It took some time for them to put it. But Bharat Movers, I think, started a HRD function, and that is also is a very interesting way in which they started. Ravi Mathai was, I think this is after his stepping aside as director of IIM. He was on the board of many corporations as when he was director, and he continued. And his main thing, Ravi Mathai used it to. It's a big lesson for most directors of B schools. Wherever he was there with a purpose. He would tell the industry to adopt new practices. Like Bharat Atmos, I'm told, in one of the board meetings, he told General Money, you are thinking too small. You have grown from some 15, 20 crore company to 70 crore company. You should think big, should be maybe in the next 5 years a 700 crore company. Apparently, General Money asked Mathai, how do I do that? He said, I'll send one of our professors, and he sent S.K. Bhattacharya to give a long-range planning for them. And S.K. Bhattacharya gave long-range planning and then asked Uadi Pareek to join him to suggest HRD to make their dream true. So there is a structure in place, there is a HRD department in place, but there are no people. BEML therefore asked IIM Ahmedabad, so we heard Professor Rao has done this work, will you send him to, can you send him? In fact, actually they asked me to join as General Manager HRD. But by the time I already tasted writing articles, disseminating. I didn't want to join a defense sector, which constrains my writing and so on. So I said I'll join to set up the HR department. But with a condition that don't call me general manager, call me advisor in general manager capacity and help me to recruit a DGM who can be groomed as a GM. So they actually, once I joined, they recruited. But that 1 year I have worked. Actually, I worked for about 7-8 months, and later I came back to IIM. Then I used to go back. Some unfortunate events have happened, which resulted in not stabilizing HRD the way we, including the death of the next chairman of BML in one of the road accidents when he was traveling from. Otherwise, he was one Brigadier Gokhale after General Mani was so devoted to this whole thing. But that year I have learned a lot of interesting things, which I wrote in a chapter introducing HRDS in a public sector company. So Udai's conceptualization, L&T's experience, and my experience of BML, we held in a 1978 week or 79, I think. We had a national seminar. IIM conducted a seminar in which Anil Khandelwal also attended. I still remember his subsequent, I think, dialogues with me and contributions. In fact, we traveled after the seminar on a train to Baroda. I was going to State Bank of Indore, I think, to do some work. He was, of course, going somewhere else and so on. So the HR philosophy, HR as a philosophy, as a set of values, competence building. Those days we used the term capability building, commitment building, motivation, and culture building. We are all very well laid out, and we tested out in a book form. So, when you are talking of HRD as a philosophy, not as merely a function, HRD is to help people to identify and enjoy the work. You spend 70% of your time in an organization your first family. And therefore, I think the job of HR department is to help people to enjoy work. So it's a philosophy. It's ingrained into your mind. Okay. That is why I joined XLRI, much against, my first contact when they contacted me was, I'm not interested in L&D professorship in XLRI. I was in Bangkok at the time, actually doing some workshop for UNESCO. Uday mentioned it's a good idea to go. I said, no, I'm not interested. I think working with Ravi always is a great kind of a thing. But later, when I returned back to Ahmedabad, I came to know they were more or less deciding on offering this to somebody else. Now, I knew this somebody else, very nice person, but he may not have had the same kind of orientation to HRD. I said, I can't let L&T chair be taken easily. Then I wrote to Father D'Souza saying, you offered me, I'm willing to accept. But I have one condition, you should let me to start a center for HRD. So we started Center for HRD, and I think with the same philosophy to promote HRD. I think 6 months after I joined, Ravi died, 1984. I joined in 83 October, 1984 February, Ravi died. Now that pulled me back to IIM. Of course, there are other factors that are responsible to pull me back. So I was very. I said we have an unfulfilled mission at IIM Ahmedabad. So I got back, and in the last seminar we organized with L&T and XLRI, Father Abraham was working with me for his Ph.D. as well as a research assistant at Center for HRD. So we came to Bombay. We were holding this national seminar on HRD. And in my mind, HRD is a mission. It has to be carried forward. So we had very interesting experiences shared. And one of the experiences were how a HRD manager converted his CEO who never believed in anything like HRD and treated HRD like an ornament. How he got him involved to address HRD, conceptualize the whole thing, and how that changed. Contrasted with another HRD manager cursing his CEO. So many experiences. We learned a lot. We learned that HRD, if it is taken as a mission, a lot can be done. We had many people, I think, one Chandrasekhar from L&T, of course, Pereira was the coordinator, CM Srivastava was there, large number of people were there. And at the end of the thing, I was returning back to Ahmedabad. So how do we continue this journey? Earlier, I proposed a center for HRD in IIM Ahmedabad as a member of Committee for Future Directions. But IIM felt that every professor specializes in something, wants a center. You can't do that. They refused that. They also refused entrepreneurship center. They have set up other kind of centers. It's okay. So I didn't want this to be left out. So in the last day of the national seminar,
Which year was this, TV? Which year?
This is 1985. 1985.
Right.
It was February 1985, 27, 28, and 1st and 2nd March 1985. I've already decided. I told XLRI I'm getting back to IIM. March I returned back to, end of March I returned back to IIM Ahmedabad. I didn't complete 2 full years. I went on leave for 2 years. 1.5 years later, this is because Ravi's pull, I think. So sitting in that seminar, when I proposed, now this is a secret which I will tell you, while I credit all the people who were responsible for starting so many things in HRD, but this is a unwritten ambition I had. HRD mission cannot be. Now you'll find this consistency. HRD old wine in a new bottle, national workshop, a program, a course in IIM Ahmedabad, a center in XLRI, and a national seminar with L&T. And when we were leaving, then I said that, look, should we learn from each other only when L&T and XLRI organize this seminar? So this was put to a discussion. No. Okay, then how do we continue to learn? We should form a body. We should form, and should this learning be associated with once in a while? No, we should have different chapters. So that is how National HRD Network was conceptualized, by my putting, I think, small things there. But the credit for christening this goes to Rajan Gupta, who was also present in that. He said, TV, why don't we call ourselves a HRD network? Network is a good term because we are networked, we are learning from each other. That is a kind of a thing. I think we jumped on it, conceptualized it. Abraham and I think the first newsletter came. In the first newsletter, which was from the Center for HRD, Abraham continued to coordinate the Center for HRD at XLRI, but he lived in Ahmedabad. Center for HRD didn't exist in Jamshedpur. It was in Ahmedabad, but the newsletter came from Jamshedpur. All the work I was doing, contracting with companies, getting them to sponsor newsletters. And we had first newsletter by L&T, second newsletter by Hindustan Petroleum, third newsletter by MMTC, Sundaram Fasteners, Sundaram Clayton, all of them. Everyone where I'm doing consulting, I only request them, please sponsor the newsletter. Give us the printing money, and we print that particular kind of a thing and distribute it. Only mailing costs and printing costs. That's all you. Abraham used it to go to Loyola Hall, St. Xavier's School, and use all the students to paste envelopes, to type. I mean, that is the way for 2 full years. HRD network, when it was not registered, we used it to work for it and so on. So you see, so many hands were involved. Bank of Baroda used to be the place where we used to meet. Besides, I think it was registered from wing number 15, where I think you and I met probably in wing number 15.
Yes, when you were Oberia chairman, yes.
Yeah, that is the registered office for National HRD Network. And that is 1986 December. Anil Khandelwal, I invited all of them for an evening tea. Of course, they all knew that this was all going on because we were discussing. Chapters continued to start working even without a formalization. We had a Baroda chapter, Rajan Gupta, Rajan Johri, and a whole lot of people. And one Prasanna used to be there, K.S. Rao in Bangalore, PVR Murthy, and S. Chandrasekhar in Chennai. Anil Sachdev and P. Purnendu Sarangi in Delhi. There were a whole lot of people. And of course, Jamshedpur, we were operating from. So that is how the National HRD Network was. But I must say, the most important hit of National HRD Network was the national conference that was held in Madras in the year 1987. Now I forget the month. I think it is October or November 1987. Why I say hit was 4 people coordinated this conference. Organization was by Chandrasekhar. You know Chandrasekhar, last Dobro construction company. I was working as a consultant for them. And therefore it was quite often I was traveling. Somnath was traveling. Uadi Pareek was in USA, was in Indonesia. He was doing work. Between 1983 and 87, Uday was for 4 years working with Rolf Linton and others in Indonesia. But he off and on would keep in touch and so on. So this particular conference, K.K. Verma, Anil Khandelwal, Father Abraham, myself from Ahmedabad. Chandrasekhar would travel once in a while. He is an excellent organizer, wonderful organizer. I mean, the first conference, 4 days of conference, 1 full day was devoted for chairman of companies to talk about their view of HRD. Dr. Krishnamurthy inaugurated it. K.K. Noria talked about it. We were doing work in Crompton Greaves, so he would talk of, he's a marketing person in those days, but sold to HRD. Then Suresh Krishna, very famous name. Venu Srinivasan, M.V. Subbaya, M.V. Arunachalam, and Kalyan Sundaram of State Bank of India. So 10 prominent CEOs from all over the country. 1 full day they talked of HR philosophy. Second and third day were on papers presented by Anil Sachdev and a whole lot of other kind of people. By the time HRD has already grown. And the most important thing was that we distributed a book on day 1. When the conference began, everyone had a book in their hand, Alternative Approaches and Strategies of HRD. That is a book edited by the 4 of us. It is in the market even today, published by Rawat Publications. And you attend a conference and all the papers that are going to be presented are there in a book. Who will not get impressed? I think everything started on time, closed on time, and very professionally conducted. That established a new body, National HRD Network, as compared to whatever other bodies were there, where cyclostyle papers are being distributed and so on. Good speakers. It's not that all the other bodies have been doing marvelous kind of work. So that is this turning point. And I must tell you, in the last day of the conference, M.R.R. Nair, Director Personnel, we used to play this very well in the first initial years. I'm taking a little more time, but I think this.
No, this is the core of it, TV. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this has some value. We would announce a small fee for the program, but our target was all the fee people pay as delegates. It may be 200 rupees or 500 rupees should be saved. Then where will the expenses be met? By sponsorship by companies. On the last day, lunch was sponsored. I mean, there are about 300 or so delegates. Those days, 300 is a big number. Held in Taj Hotel, Taj Residency or Madras, I think. I forget now what is it called. So the lunch was sponsored by SAIL. And then the third or fourth day of the conference closed with third day of the conference closed with the AGM of the National HRD Network. I don't know if you remember one person by name Meenakshi Kasliwal. She was a fellow from IIM Ahmedabad. I think she joined some company and she was sitting in the audience, and at the end of it, in the AGM, she made a remark. She said that I have witnessed with a lot of enthusiasm what happened in the last 2.5 days. I have learned a lot, but I've come to one conclusion. HRD is an elitistic concept. It looks as though elitistic concept. It looks as though it is meant only for managers. Where are the real people who matter in industry? That was her comment. And this is what is important for a person who probably is looking after. I said that's a very important comment. Very interesting comment. Then I poured out about why HRD is important for workmen and how it was very much in our original design. And said next conference will be on HRD for workers. And that evening, we elected Nair as the next president. 2 years before, Nair had the mandate to run a conference of the National HRD Network focusing on workers. And it is MRR Nair, his connections with political circles, with unions, with all of, I think, a remarkable kind of conference we had, inaugurated by Abid Hussain. And we had Ramanujam and a whole lot of other trade union leaders come and speak about the importance of HR. So I think that is when you will find a old picture. All OB stalwarts were there. Uadi Pareek returned from Indonesia. Kalal Flinton was there. Dharani Sinha was there. Abad Ahmad was there. Somnath Chattopadhyay was there. D.M. Pestanji was there. So all of us, I think you will find one rare picture. That was the conference that has established solidly National HRD Network. And after that, we had a mission vision workshop the year after that in Chennai. The question again, I mean, I would sometimes raise these questions mischievously. Like Meenakshi raised the question that should HRD be only elitistic kind of a thing. I raised the question, what is the future of HRD? HRD means only in corporate sector. It should be, I mean, HRD is, I had by the time already written an article, series of articles on HRD in a national context. What does it mean? Now that is where background and all whatever Uday and I come into picture. In the Mission Vision workshop, which was facilitated by V.S. Mahesh and Anil Sachdev, this was a Mission Vision workshop of 30 of the all stalwarts in HR, office bearers, different chapter presidents. One full day we reflected. The thing was, this is a professional body. You can only go up to a point of time. You can't go beyond it. You should start. If HR really has to get disseminated, we need an institution. That is when they conceptualized a center. And again, Uadi Pareek, MRR Nair, Father Abraham, Keith D'Souza, and one Rakesh Kumar, who is now with SAIL in Delhi.
He was my colleague. We were together.
Oh, he was, yes. You remember him, Rakesh. He was there. We all met in Bhilai. Again, I think I must mention this, Pramod. Most of the time when I am doing consulting, I use that opportunity to promote HRD. For me, consulting is not merely bringing change in a small way. It's an opportunity to network. It's an opportunity to... So we all had a get-together. Keith D'Souza and Father Abraham drove from Jamshedpur to Bhilai. Rakesh was there with MRR anyway. MRR was managing director of Bhilai Steel at the time. From director personnel, he went to... So we said that, how do we take it forward? That's when we conceptualized the Academy of HRD. We must call this as an Academy of HRD. And that is when we christened it and created, I think, the constitution should be the same as that of the network, because this body is to promote what HRD network stood for. And it should be more of an institution and so on. And MRR wrote to Narayan Sheth, requesting my services to be spared to work as a part-time honorary. Because this concept of honorary director was available in IIM Ahmedabad. Vikram Sarabhai was never on the salaries of IIM. He was honorary director and so on. So he wrote saying that, and then by the time we started Ravi Mathai Center at IIM Ahmedabad. So Narayan called me and said, TV, I have this letter and I'll be very happy if you spend as much time as you like to build the Academy of HRD. But I have only one requirement. And that is, I'll treat this as Ravi Mathai's institution building project. You should continue to teach whatever you're required to teach, not negotiable. That teach, but you should document your experience of building this Academy of HRD. And that document will be an institution building document for the... So he gave me full permission, which was not necessary actually. I mean, it was nice, so nice of Narayan to give it in writing. Spend as much time. That is how the Academy of HRD was born. So CHRD, AHRD, and NHRD, and to me, they are all complementary and they all meant for a particular cause. And the mission of AHRD was more to get into non-corporate sector. Now that is a distant dream we have, Even today, I don't think we are anywhere near, but we have done a number of things. Academy of HRD has done marvelous things. We are very happy that we have, by now, there are about 40 and odd students who got their fellowship. About 35 of them through the AICTE recognized channels. Others, I think, are happy to be called as fellows of AHRD. And National HRD Network, you know how it has spread. I don't need to mention, because you mentioned the who is who in India in HR. They all were people who contributed to its growth.
Absolutely.
Either
Absolutely.
Arvind, Anil Khandelwal, Arvind KK Verma, NS Rajan, Santrut Mishra, Dwarka Nath, Akhil Basrai, and Siddiqui, S.Y. Siddiqui. I think all of them, each one of them during their presidential term. Then our friend from ICICI Bank, so many of them. And academic side, Pashanji, Ramnarayan, in their own way, providing constantly, Biju, then Dr. Preetham Singh, Bhatnagar, so many of them, I think, continue to contribute.
Absolutely.
That's a long story. I'm sorry I've taken a lot,
actually,
of time.
It is only in this conversation that you have completed the whole orbit, because the earlier one was covered, but Center for HRD, then National HRD Network, then Academy for HRD, and in all of this, while, like you have rightly acknowledged, there are a number of people who kind of contributed and coordinated, but I'm really, I can't think of many people who will have a missionary zeal like you, that you go after it, bring people together, get companies to sponsor, get students to make envelopes and send out, unless somebody has a personal commitment that I want to take this profession somewhere. Nobody would put this kind of effort and dedication, and that is why I think we have HRD as a discipline where we have it. And like you rightly say, that you name the HR leader in the country, and they have been
associated with
yes, they've been associated as a leader or in some capacity and support and things like that, and it continues to grow. So thanks for sharing this. I'm sure people who are associated with HR function would be nostalgic about listening to, from the room in Taj to where HRD is today. It's absolutely nostalgic, and people should know how things have progressed to get to this stage. Thanks very much. Now, in the time that we have, at this point, when you reflect on the function and the people who are manning this function, and the vision for HRD, the philosophy and the vision for HRD, what are your thoughts and your suggestions on the future directions? It will be good to hear from someone who pioneered this effort, that at this point of time, how do you see it, and what will be your, I don't know whether to call it aspiration or direction or vision, but whatever you want to call it, it'll be good to hear from someone who has been through this journey of the discipline.
Yeah, well, of course, just before I go on to that, I must mention that both Uadi Pareek and Father Abraham, two of them, all through until they died. Unfortunately, we lost Father Abraham recently. Uday died in 2010. Even without any positions, they were always there. Anytime HRD network needed. I think so. I think three of us, certainly, I think they were great source of strength for me. Regarding the question that you have asked, I think the pandemic has thrown entirely the world out of gear. And I see many positives in this. The most important thing that is closer to HR philosophy is pandemic has re-established all people are born talented. They are equal. Today, virus, the news travel, the technology enabled news to travel much faster than the virus. I think that's a great thing that happened. In 1985, when we thought of network, there was even you have to stand in a queue even to make a STD call. There were no emails. But today, we walk with the world in our pocket. All that you need is this little cell phone. Everything is here, everything you want. Now, other thing that happened as a result of this last 2 years, I keep wondering what an tremendous amount of leadership that has thrown out. Every webinar announcement I look at, there are several people whose names I have not even heard. Several people. I think the last few months have thrown thousands of leaders to the forefront. Leadership has blossomed. That proves the point. HR philosophy. All people are born talented. You have to create a set of circumstances, which we call as octopus values. If you create an octopus value, people will blossom. Pandemic has created that octopus value. All are equal. You need to, I think you don't need to go to office to work. You can sit at home and work. Okay, a whole lot of other kind of things. To me, this is a great opportunity for HR. In fact, I think even before pandemic, I started saying HR is not the job of HR alone. HR is the job of everyone. In fact, don't wait for HR to develop you. You need to develop yourself. So I said HR for all. HRD, everyone is a HRD manager. When people give me names, I think very funnily, I think there were these titles floating around. TV Rao is one of the fathers of HRD. Uadi Pareek is another father. I very jocularly say, I don't have any child with the name of HRD. Number one. And number two, everyone is his or her own father. There is no one single. And I still remember in one of the seminars when T.N. Session and I were invited. He was the chief guest, and the director of that institute introduced me as father of HRD. And Mr. Session got wild. He said, how can you call anyone a father of HRD? The real father of HRD is Ved Vyas. So I tell people, I think it's a joke here to call anyone a father of HRD. So I tell people, you are your own father. You have to nurture your HRD. You have to take charge. If you look at Peter Drucker, look at anyone, all of them ended up saying self-management is the best way. Self-leadership is the best way. To me, HR philosophy stands that. The conceptualization, I think I would normally recommend people, please read our original concept of HRD. If you read the principles of HRD, which Uday and I outlined, it's largely Uday's contribution, 14 principles, really talk about what is needed today post-pandemic. If you want to create a culture where, in fact, I revisited Maslow's need hierarchy and I say there are only 3 needs. You need for survival. Second is need for security, economic security, health security, and emotional security. Once these are fulfilled, everyone is looking for identity. Multiple identities, multiple leaderships can come up and so on. So for me, HR's job is to make everyone his own or her own HR manager. That I am not sure if 90% of HR managers realize. They are still stuck in the administrative roles.
Yes,
so I would want that HR professionals to move out of it. And what a God-given gift to be called a talent manager, HR manager. Nowadays, I joined Sadhguru in calling human possibilities manager, or whatever you have. I think in those days, I used to laugh when people like Chakravarti and Pulengarg said, no, call HR as human response development. But today I say, yes, you call it response development. Every human being should understand how to respond to a variety of situations. So I myself broadened to look at HR as a job of everyone. And HR people are not only saviors of if you recognize it, you are far higher than a medical doctor. Medical doctor saves your life. You are not only saving life because you have to take care of the family, you take care of the surroundings, you take care of the environment. You also provide livelihood because you are an employer champion. That is what livelihood. Employee champion, family champion, societal champion. So I find here HR in corporate sector, HR at the nation, HR at society, all getting integrated. I think that is the kind of a thing, if a good HR person, maybe at 35 you don't want to do that, at 25 you don't want to do that, but can you? I mean, we people were all the time saying it, but why do you have to wait till your retirement age, 60th year, to start giving what you call as giving back. I think you are giving back from day one. You can give back at any point of time. So this is the kind of a thing which HR people should do. Understand the real meaning of HR is self-management, learning continuously, and coexistence, and make the place worth living, not only for you, but for everyone around. And we should be thinking, I remember Tagore's poem, where the world is without fear. Yeah. If you go through
and
this,
the head held high.
Yes. Yeah, and the head held high. I think we need a society where we don't divide people by religion, caste, community, political affiliation, geographic kind of a thing. Okay, geography you need to have. It's very difficult politically to abolish. A boundaryless society where human beings are respected. And that is something, peace, I think, for all. I think that is the desire. That is where I say, I think sometimes you may even become a spiritual function and so on. It's not necessarily spiritual function. In every human being, there is spirituality. In fact, that is the great tradition of India. People like Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, any one of them, if you look at it and so on. So that is the way I look at it. And I'm so happy the people whom you have interviewed in the past. Yeah. I think if you look at Pradeep's latest writings, if you look at even Anil's view some point of time, Gopal Krishna's views, I think they are all moving towards this kind of a common kind of a thing. So that is what I think is
very much so. Amazing. I think this is a really holistic and a composite view of how HR professionals and HR functions should look at itself. It's truly all-encompassing, like you say, and it is actually a very core in the nature of people. And self-management is a wonderful thing, and we in HR are absolutely fortunate, like you say, that we have a little role. Our role enables us to play a little part in helping people be better self-managed. And if we look at it in that context, as a facilitator, enabler, rather than as administrator, I think we will be seen a lot more valuable. So it's a wonderful thought, and I'm sure a lot of people will connect with it. I have a good mind to widely disseminate this, invite people to share their observations. But I think as a way forward, these reflections can be wonderful guideposts for people to position and direct their efforts. So I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Thank you enough, TV. Someone who had spent 5 decades and counting when he speaks on that work, the passion, the clarity, the energy, all of it shows. I thoroughly enjoyed I never had for a moment felt that this is another round of conversation we are having. And I'm sure everybody who listens will find it full of meaning, full of passion, full of commitment, which is what brings out the kind of work that you all have done. And thank you so much. And we look forward to your continued guidance in this space.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think it is very nice of you to have provided me this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
And Happy New Year to all. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy Sankranti.
Thank you.